All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Bible study here Wednesday at Grace Baptist Church in Canby. We are in Genesis, and we're going to be in chapter 25, and we are looking at verses 1 all the way down to verse 18. So, death of Abraham, as well as mentioning of Ishmael's sons. So you said you wanted to read?
Yeah, I'll read it.
All right, loud and proud.
Now Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore to him Zimran, Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And Jokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Ashurim, and Letushim, and Leumim. And the sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, and Hanok, and Abida, and Eldah. All these were the sons of Keturah. Now Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac, but to the sons of his concubines Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and sent them away from his son eastward to the land of the east. And these are all the years of Abraham's life that he lived, 175 years. And Abraham breathed his last and died in a ripe old age, an old man and satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people. Then his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. And it came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac lived by Beer Laharoi. Now these are the records of the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names, in the order of their birth: Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, and Abdil, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, Hadad, and Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names, by their villages and by their camps, 12 princes according to their tribes. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. And they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt. As one goes towards Assyria, he settled in defiance of all of his relatives.
All right. Thank you. All right. So, that's the passage we're looking at today. And most of it consists of genealogy, and we'll talk about that. But we're just told that Abraham takes another wife, and name of Keturah. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing. People might say, oh, well, that's horrible of him because, that's almost, how dare he almost dishonor. But of course, there's nothing wrong with picking up another wife, and God never forbid him, saying how, never do that. So, yeah. So, and often some translations say wife, some translations say concubine. So,
same thing.
Especially at that time. So, there's definitely no issue. That doesn't mean he didn't care for Sarah, obviously. He, mourned for her and cared, but again, life goes on. She wasn't, coming back anytime. So, obviously something happened with the Keturah, and he wanted to marry another woman. And I think it's really interesting because, you got to think, he's approximately got to be about roughly 120, maybe 130 when she marries him. So again, it would have been really interesting to see how people aged back then, because it definitely makes me think it was different, because he lives to 175, and we're told Ishmael lives to about 130 or so, and I think Isaac lives an old, several, over 100. So people weren't dying until quite a bit of time. Now, of course, it's hard to say if this wasn't just Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael, because maybe God had favor on Abraham, and then through him, Isaac and Ishmael, it would be easier to make a statement if we had, one of those stats of, these are the people's age, but we don't have that. But it definitely seems to reason that people lived, just a little bit over 120. And we do remember that God said he would shorten people's lives to about 120. And then, people seem to still kind of get a little up there, but not like it was before when people were living 700 and 900. But it would have been interesting to see, him being 130. Was, he more like he would be 60 today, or was he kind of like someone who was over their hundreds today? But obviously he was still in good physique because he has six kids. So obviously he was still in pretty good health.
So did a lot of stretching.
Yeah, did a lot of stretching for sure. Yeah, so he's pretty healthy, and I imagine that he was able to grow, be with them for a good amount of their childhood, especially if he's living to 175. I think that's easily 30 years he was able to at least spend with each one. So definitely able to help, them to grow and mature. And then we're given, the sons of Keturah. Then it's interesting because we're then told only about the sons of Dedan and then the sons of Midian. And it almost seems to then, I also missed Jokshan. So it almost seems to indicate that Zimran and Midian and Ishbak and Shua didn't have sons, because there's no mentioning of them. And these are also mentioned in 1 Chronicles 1. 1 Chronicles is great because it's full of genealogy. And again, it mentions this list, but it doesn't mention any other ones. And it almost says that these are the descendants of Keturah, like that's it. So it's kind of hard to say, did they just die off like without, offspring, or were they not that big enough to really record? Because we'll also talk about why all this genealogy, at the end. So just keep that in mind. But it's interesting. It definitely seems to indicate that they didn't have any descendants, or maybe they just had girls, because especially at this time, that's all they really recorded. There's, once in a while they'll record a female, but most of it is all male. So it could be reason too, they just had females. So then, of course, then their bloodline isn't going to be passed down, because it was only considered through the male that, blood would be passed. And then we get to, of course, Abraham, before he dies, he gives Isaac all. He gives Isaac all. And why, again, the question that's pretty obvious, why does he give Isaac everything?
Because he was the firstborn.
Because he's not the firstborn.
He's
considered the firstborn. But also there's that covenant that through Isaac, the blessing would happen. So of course he's going to give Isaac everything. And I imagine people would think, oh, this is unfair because he's had these 6 sons and they're not going to get anything. Well,
I should have said he's the firstborn through Sarah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. But again, at the same time, it was Abraham's right to do with his stuff what he wanted to. So he honestly didn't have to give his other 6 children anything. But, giving them gifts does, I think, attribute to Abraham's righteousness, that he was a caring, fair individual. He wasn't just going to send them off with nothing. But
he did that with Ishmael.
He did that with Ishmael. But we're going to get back to Ishmael because he does come back.
Yeah.
So, but Abraham sends them away. What do you guys think? Why does Abraham send them off to the east? What do you guys think?
Where did he send them off to?
He said, no, why did he send the other 6 kids away from Isaac?
He didn't want them to be an intrusion to Ishmael.
Yeah.
Isaac.
Yeah, Isaac. Yeah.
Isaac.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's a big portion because, God tells them where you're at, these are where your descendants are going to be. And it's from Isaac that this is going to be. And yeah, if you have 6 other sons who are there, they could easily get in the way. They could easily cause a problem for Isaac. So I could see Abraham being worried about that this is supposed to be from Isaac and his descendants. So, it's not to be yours. And it's interesting because we can see that Abraham, he almost seems to anticipate this at a short-term aspect. He almost seems like this is going to happen almost sooner, when we know it doesn't happen for quite a while. Like you have Isaac, then you have Jacob and his 12 sons, and then they go off to Egypt. So they almost lose, everything that Abraham is trying to build for them. And it's not until Moses actually takes them all, and they then, even after that, they wander for 40 years. And it's that generation that actually starts to, fulfill what God has promised. But it's interesting because you can almost see Abraham's thinking that, this might happen in Isaac's time. Like, I want to make sure that he's set up for success. And sadly, even though he does all that, it doesn't matter because they end up all going to Egypt anyway. And it's them having to leave Egypt
That just makes me think of something. That's a good point, but maybe, okay, so God said he was going to give them the land,
Yeah.
right? And what God did when he did give them the land is he destroyed a lot of the people that were there.
Yeah, and I
And
imagine
maybe he didn't want these offspring destroyed, so he sent them away from the area. Like, you guys can't even be here because if you're here, my son's going to take this over, and your descendants are doomed.
Yeah, that's
Basically he sent them
to safety. Yeah,
for safety. And one of the things it says at the end here is that Isaac settled nearby in defiance of all his relatives, like even Ishmael. Even Ishmael was being defiant by not leaving.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Yeah, he could have easily known that those who are here in this land are going to be conquered, and he wouldn't want them them and their descendants to be at a risk. Yeah, good. All right, yeah, and then of course Abraham is quite old, 175, and it's definitely an astonishing thing. So Abraham lives at a good age, and then it's interesting because when Ishmael is sent off, we almost get this picture that he's like cut off, that, no longer are you allowed here. But it's interesting to find out that when Abraham passes away, both Isaac and Ishmael are there to bury him. So there must have obviously been some communication. It's hard to say exactly how much communication. I almost wonder if after Sarah died, Abraham was able to more freely talk to Ishmael. But yeah, it's hard to say. But obviously, there was some communication where Ishmael was able to find out that his dad had passed away. And obviously there wasn't any resentment. Obviously he still cared for Abraham enough to go over there and to, bury him with Isaac. So, definitely being interesting to find out more about that dynamic. Isaac, it's hard to say whether or not he was okay with Ishmael being there, but obviously he's not so opposed where he doesn't allow it. So it would be very interesting to find out more about, Ishmael and how close he was to Abraham as well as Isaac. But as Asa points out, he kind of does become rebellious, and, he's living in the area despite, knowing that it's going to cause controversy and some issues. So, it's interesting that Ishmael is still kind of in the circle, and he's still there, and he's still kind of doing some things. And then we're told,
even these days, if a person is rich and has several heirs, that there is also a way where they try to challenge the issuing of the father's money to the other, because someone felt, well, I didn't get enough, and that was his favorite, or I stayed with him when he was the worst off, ill, while you people were out there wandering around. So consequently, he sent him away, so there wouldn't be any contention for the inheritance.
That's a good possibility too, because once Abraham passed away, who knows what would happen, The 6 sons could have easily gathered together and tried to usurp Isaac, so, good point. And then we're, given Ishmael's descendants, he has, what I find interesting is he has how many sons? 12. And they are princes according to their tribes. And so I find that very interesting. It's not Isaac who has the 12, but his son Jacob, who has the 12, who end up becoming the tribes of Israel. So it's very interesting that Ishmael has 12 descendants, and they are, considered princes according to their tribes. So, definitely kind of creates, some questions.
Well, God promised to happen. before.
Yeah, he did.
Like when, and this is another, I was looking this up just a minute ago. In Genesis 16, when Hagar ran away from Sarah, the Lord spoke with her and said, or he sent an angel. The angel of the Lord spoke with her and said, return to your mistress. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. And you're going to have a son, his name's going to be Ishmael. So there was a prophecy over the boy's descendants.
Mhm.
But then, okay, so then another thing is that happened. So she named that place Bir Lahoroi, which means the one who sees me, God, the one who sees me. And that's mentioned again in the verse that we're in.
Mhm.
But also, remember when, before Sarah was pregnant, Abraham asked God, well, can't you just bless Isaac or
Mhm.
Ishmael? And he said, no, Isaac, but he did give a promise about him. And I think he said that he was gonna, the 12 kings were gonna come from him. I'm trying to find that place.
Yeah, the angel told
Abraham,
Ishmael, not Ishmael,
Abraham.
that she was gonna have a son and he was gonna be leaders, he was gonna have leaders
Yeah.
of his nation.
Yeah, he says you won't forget Ishmael. So that's definitely the case. He's got 12 sons and they're considered 12 princes. So it definitely seems to reason that they're kind of a small mimic of what, Israel is to be.
Oh yeah, it's in 17, he says, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. But God said, no, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And he says, as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I will bless him and make him fruitful, multiply him exceedingly. He shall become the father of 12 princes.
Yeah.
Now I'll make him a great nation.
Yeah.
So,
We see that fulfilled.
we see it fulfilled.
Yeah.
God was faithful to Abraham.
Yeah.
Abraham.
But it's kind of clear that, they're kind of not the righteous line that's desired, because as it says at the end, there's animosity between them. It's probably easily clear that they're probably fighting over each other. And so, even though they're blessed with many, they're, sadly not a very righteous line. So,
Well, remember also that the wives were important.
Mhm.
So that's why Isaac had to come from Sarah. So these sons from Ishmael married an Egyptian.
yeah.
So they weren't considered,
Yeah.
of the line. of
But these
Abraham.
12 tribes were gonna be against the 12 tribes of Israel. And consequently, God wanted to let the 12 tribes of Israel, that Abraham had another son named Ishmael, and they counted also in their hierarchy. And a lot of this is what we're seeing today. The 12 tribes of Ishmael are fighting against the 12 tribes of Israel in the Holy Land. In other words, what do they call the people of the Arab nations, which are the 12 tribes, are also fighting against the 12 tribes of Jesus and his brothers in the Holy Land.
Yeah.
And it won't end until Jesus comes to put everything in order.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Asa Jr., that you mentioned, it's important where his mother comes from, because, like you mentioned, Ishmael, he marries a Egyptian, and it's obviously clear that where the mother comes from is important, where Abraham makes sure that Isaac's wife is from, his own family, and then even Isaac with Jacob, making sure that Jacob has a family from, Laban, which is still from that line. So it's interesting that there's so much. It's interesting that there's that assurance that it's from that specific line. So there, definitely a big plan in regards to that. So then the question to kind of take away is, why this list of offspring? You know, because a lot of people just kind of like, oh, this is just boring nonsense, you know, especially like books like First Corinthians. And it's like, what, you know, this is all just, you know, they skim over the list of names like, oh, it's just so boring. Like, you know, but I feel, you know, of course, every word of God's, you know, word is important. So why have this list of genealogy? What makes it important? What do you guys think?
I think God's being faithful to his word to Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
you know, by mentioning these descendants. He's saying, I did what I told you I was going to do.
Yeah. Not only is, you know, God showing that he's kept his promise, but especially for the readers of the time, or, you know, those who are reading this, it's a history. This, you know, basically is a history book. And we even do that today of, oh, you know, this person came and, you know, they conquered and it became Spain, or, you know, so-and-so went over and they established France. We do that. And this is, of course, the exact history of what, you know, was probably Moses' time. Of, oh, you know, those one people, well, guess what? They came from this line, you know, they came from Ishmael's line. And, oh, you know, this people, you know, this is how they came about to be. And I think that's just something that really attributes to the Bible being the word of truth, and that it is true because, you know, why else would there be a list of names if they didn't have importance? You know, other books that don't have any truth to them, they don't bother. You know, it's all based on entertainment. It's all based on, you know, some kind of story, whereas this is history. You know, this is how, you know, certain tribes came to be. And of course, they've all been wiped out and, you know, they don't really matter too much anymore. But during Moses' time, I'm sure it mattered a lot. You know, oh, you know, those people, well, they came from Mibsam or
Right.
so-and-so, you know, so we know their lineage, we know their heritage.
Their relatives.
Yeah, we know, yeah.
Yeah.
So we know.
They had something in common, and that was, God was the God of all of them there.
Yeah.
And not only because he was our God, or the other one said, no, he was with us first. So there was a good way for the people to decide which God were they going to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And that came about with Moses establishing the Ten Commandments. Who were going to obey the Ten Commandments?
Yeah, and I think it also kind of, especially, you know, Moses writing for the Hebrews really establishes and helps them to see that you are God's chosen people. You know, look at all these other lineages, but, you know, look at the results of them. Whereas, you know, we come, you know, speaking as Moses, you know, we come specifically from Abraham, who came from Isaac, and it was, you know, thoroughly planned out. And, you know, again, I think it, you know, it's still good for us, but I think back then it probably was a lot more meaningful for Moses and the Hebrews, and, you know, especially because they were closer to these incidences. So.
Yeah, and I flipped right to it, but a couple of these names, like Midian,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to be done. The tribe of Midian is going to come up in Exodus.
Yep.
Because I think Moses' father-in-law was from Midian.
Yeah.
And the Ishmaelites also going to come up because the 12 the sons of Israel sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites.
Yeah.
So, and the interesting thing about that is it says Midianite traders
Mm-hmm.
and Ishmaelites. So,
Yeah.
and they knew who they're like, hey, these are kind of
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure they could.
they're
yeah.
distant relatives. But they're
It's
cousins.
like, oh, you're our
cousins or whatever.
cousins. So yeah. You know, and again, I think it does breathe light into the Bible that, you know, these were real people, real situations, real circumstances. It just happened several thousand years ago. So, you know, it's kind of lost, you know, in that, but, you know, still very relative. And yeah, like you pointed out, you know, they still play a factor throughout, you know, even the Bible then too. I did see, you know, when I was looking up some of the names, I did see other mentions of Dedan, but it was hard to say whether it was actually from Dedan or, again, if it was just such a common name, because.
From, or was it a place?
Yeah, it was kind of, I can't remember if it was a place or.
Could have been, and if it was named
Yeah.
after him.
Yeah, Yeah, and again, that's the thing too, is like, oh, well, this is the place of Dan, and this is where it gets its name from. We know that too, of, why is Canby named Canby, and all those things, so. Any final thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
Just this name I mentioned before, Bir Laharoy.
Yeah,
It says that Isaac lived there.
yeah, he goes down there, yep.
After the death of Abraham, Isaac moved there. I thought that's just kind of weird.
Yeah,
Why would he move there? Probably wasn't that far away, but it was a specific place that Hagar lived.
yeah,
And that God spoke to Hagar.
right.
And I just think that's interesting that he is drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it, makes you wonder, did he know the account of, why it was named that, and so, yeah, very
Maybe he
interesting.
thought it was a holy place because
Yeah, an angel spoke to,
God was watching it.
yeah,
He wanted to be there.
yeah, it's a good case, Well, if he talked to Hagar there, why not more me?
Right.
So, all right. Well, we will close in prayer and we'll be dismissed. God, just want to thank you for this time, and I want to thank you for this Bible study. And we do want to lift up Gary at this time as he's having some ailments with his leg. And we just pray that tomorrow seeing the doctors can be helpful. And we just pray that until we're able to meet again, that you just be with us and bless us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, I might as well answer it now. Dad, answer it.